Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. I'm here with one of my favorite co-hosts, Joseph. How are you today?
Thank you, Mary. Great to be here. Of course, other co-hosts may now take offense, but yeah, you snooze, you lose, I guess. It's all good.
I guess you're right. And I did think about that when that came out of my mouth, but I thought, what the heck?
Hey, you're one of my favorite people, so we're
Absolutely.
just good.
And right back at you. And I really do mean that. We've been friends for a couple years since we've been doing the podcast. We've only seen each other how many times in person?
Twice.
Twice. So I think we're due for a visit at some point.
For sure.
Well, Joseph, I know we have a guest who is slightly familiar to Prime Life, and we're very excited to welcome her back. So why don't you take it away?
Sure thing. So for all of our regular listeners, I'd like to welcome back Laurie Hirsch Schulz, who is a purpose-centered career transition coach who supports high-achieving individuals navigate through inflection points in their lives. Laurie, welcome back to the show. Tell our audience a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, Joseph and Mary. Thanks for having me back. It's nice to see you all. So I'd like to say I'm a transition coach. I focus primarily on careers, and I like to say that I focus on the intersection of life and work with a bias toward the work. But I'm really focused on, I work with people who are at professional inflection points and personal inflection points as well. And looking at how do you navigate through change to get to some place that is really much more meaningful to you, that reflects what your personal values are, what your purpose is. And then there's a lot more satisfaction in whatever you're doing. But navigating those inflection points can be really, can feel really disruptive. It can feel really super uncomfortable. And so people partner with me to get more clarity and to feel more confident so that they get to that other side and find a place where they're really happy and they're more fulfilled. So that's the work that I do.
So Laurie, what are some of the patterns that you see with individuals that had amazing careers, very fulfilled, high achievers, and now they are going into a transition or an inflection point? Can you share that?
Yeah. Let's define inflection points a little bit first, because I'm a career transition coach. I think that the first place everyone's going to go to is, retirement. Or in this day and age, job loss, maybe when you're not quite ready to be for a job loss. Those inflection points can be, they can be personal. So it can be triggered by an empty nest. It can be triggered by the death of a parent. It can be triggered by moving, or maybe your friends and your friends and your neighbors are all beginning to move and are beginning to leave. And gee, what does that look like? So that's the first place. I mean, there's a lot of different inflection. It can be triggered by an illness. So from a health perspective. So there's a lot of different places where there's inflection points. And I think that particularly for high achievers, but first of all, for everyone, change is scary and really uncomfortable. For most people, I think that's only human. And lack of clarity is uncomfortable. And but I also think for high achievers, there's this real or a tendency to look toward the past to define who you are. I've been a mother. I've been a daughter, a caretaker for parents. I've been whatever my work may be, and that's the identity. I'm a wage earner. I mean, that alone is like, for years, part of who you are that defines you is that I bring money in, that I make money. I get a paycheck every week. I get a paycheck every other week. And, maybe I love the job, maybe I don't, but that's part of defining it. So I think, so when you define that inflection point and then you think about how do you navigate through that change, it's, what is that? There's a lot of discomfort in, now what do I look like next? What does that look like for me? How do I define who I am? So I think, does that answer your question? I mean, I think that's a lot of what I see.
Yeah, no, that definitely answers my question. And I'm going to let Joseph go because I have another question. Of course, right? Leading up to that. Go ahead, Joseph.
So I was going to just reference a conversation, Mary, you and I had with another guest recently where we were talking about being stuck and kind of in that, similar to inflection point, I guess, just not sure how to move forward. So how can you tell if you're stuck in an inflection point, when you need that kick in the pants, like how do you defined it, but how do you sort of identify it on your own? And then what steps can you take to move forward?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. NASA insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
That's a great question. And I think that it's not always obvious. I mean, there may be like a lot of anxiety or depression. And I heard this term recently, high functioning depression, which this is the idea of always like you get everything done and everything works and everyone says, oh, look at everything that you've done. But there's this emptiness that you may find, or there's a lack of joy. So I think some of it is listening to that. And is that really what that lack of joy or lack of enjoyment in what or connection with what you're doing? It could also be, I mean, it just might be a whisper in your ear. I think in this day and age in particular, where there's a lot of, it feels very chaotic. I think that some people are beginning to think, well, what can I do? I wrote a LinkedIn post about this recently. What can I do? How do I want to show up in this moment? And rather than feeling helpless, there's this opportunity to not, so that helplessness might be what you're feeling, but that's not how you want to show up. So listening to those questions in your head, what do I do? What can I do? How do I want to show up? So I think that those are some of those, it's listening and not just settling for okay. That's the way it should always be. So that's where I would start.
Do you find with the individuals that come to seek your advice, they have some fear, and that's part of perhaps talking to them about that, right? Because there's fear of the unknown, or what am I going to do now? And I think in a couple of your notes, it's like many of these individuals, if not all of them, probably are very resourceful, or they were at one point, and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
why can't I figure this out? And
Yeah,
I'm just assuming that fear goes with that. But, I'm not 100% sure, but I'd love for you to kind of touch upon that a little bit.
well, I think again, the human response to change is fear to a certain degree. But I mean, a certain client comes to mind who she had navigated through a lot of change. She got divorced. She became a single mom. She raised her kids all on her own, and she needed and financially she needed to support her kids. And she navigated through that. She became a financial planner and was very successful. And then her kids grew up. They went to school. They got married, and all of a sudden, all her friends started retiring or leaving their work, and she was like, "Well, I really like my work," and I'm not ready to leave, but there was this fear of what does that look like when I leave work, and so what we partnered together on is, well, okay, what does that look like? And and she was kind of like, well, and when do I leave? And it was she had this real discomfort with this idea of unstructured days with lots of emptiness, to fill, because she had been going for so long. She was a single mom. She was working. She was, all those things, and then retiring. So the work that we did was really looking at how do you want to define yourself going forward? And she had the scaffolding. She had a partner. She loved to travel. She was on the board of her co-op. So, I mean, she had this scaffolding, but the idea of what do you do, she wasn't recognizing that scaffolding and looking at how do you build upon that scaffolding. And so it was really just a matter of getting that confidence that, navigating through that really significant transition point and really bringing perspective to what have been your past achievements and how do you build them to where you want to go next.
So
yeah,
you were describing a lot of things, and the word that popped into my head was passion. So if I love my job, I have passion for that work, or I love where I was in life and now things have changed. So is this simply about like finding a new passion to replace the old passion, or is it more than that?
it's
And
such
how
an
do you
interesting, that's really interesting, because I have a very troubled relationship with the word passion. I think that there's a lot of judgment. I mean, that people think, oh, well, I don't have a passion, so there must be something wrong with me, or I'm not going to find it.
Right, like people write books about how to find things to be passionate about, and you'll be successful if you're passionate. Yeah, I agree.
think that's fair. And I think, boy, lucky people who know that their passion is to play the violin and they play it over and over and over again. I like to think of it a little bit more around purpose and more around what's the impact you want to have, and how do you want to show up in the world? And that doesn't have to be, some people have very lofty purposes, but some people, it's different for everyone. And I think, I always, the first thing I do with every client is define what are the values, what are your non-negotiable values. And so, it's different for everyone. And everyone defines, what are, maybe it's around spirituality or whatever. Everyone has these different definitions. And if you can get clarity on those pieces, on how do you want to show up in the world? And actually, I want to talk about one of the things is how do you kind of start thinking about your purpose? But if you can have more clarity around that, as well as, again, I talked about your accomplishments, and just have that can then guide you toward what your next purpose may be. Your purpose before might have been different, but it's still embedded in what's really important to you and what's non-negotiable to you. So I think it's getting that clarity. And one of the things that I do after I work with people, I call it your personal compass. After I work with people to get that clarity around values, purpose, what are your capabilities, your skills, what are the things that you bring to the world? I think what's really important is really getting clarity on what are you trying to solve for? This question of is a really, really interesting one, because lots of people come to me and they have a hypothesis of what they're trying to solve for. I hate my job. I don't like what I'm doing. It's, I'm so anxious, and I know like I've got way too much going on. And once they have that clarity around their compass, frequently what I'm trying to solve for changes, or it's definitely clicks into place in a much different way than what they thought they were trying to solve for when they first started working for me.
Yeah, I like that you brought up purpose. We did have a guest on our program. I'm going to give him a shout out. He wrote a book called The Purpose Code, Jordan Grummett, and he talked about big P and little p. And he said oftentimes people assign their purpose to the big P, which can be very challenging and devastating because it's all about like the achievements, the accomplishments, when maybe we should focus on the little p, which is more about what brings us joy. And maybe it's spending time with friends and family or collecting. He told quite a few stories about collecting baseball cards when he was young and different things. And it was very interesting. And it really made me also reflect on that. So I'm really glad that we kind of talked about passion versus purpose, because I know that people are looking for that perhaps, but sometimes assign so much to that can be very much where you feel almost immobilized.
Yeah.
You can get stress. I don't know, Laurie, if you find that can be a level of stress, and people come to you to kind of talk through some of that.
Well, I think there's that immobilization, and I want to talk about, we're talking about all these P's: purpose, passion. I'm going to talk about permission a little bit too. So I had a client who got laid off from she's 30-year career in nonprofit in the pharmaceutical space, and she came to me and she's like, let's talk about, I want to get back into that. Maybe I want to do maybe in a different role, maybe. And as we talked about this compass, where do you want to go next? What's driving you? What are your values? What are your how do you want to show up in the world? It gave her, what she realized is that she needed, what she was trying to solve for wasn't just her career. It was that she was at this opportunity. Her kids were out of the house. She had just gotten married, a second marriage. She realized that she wanted to spend more time in her life, living her life, and not just about the work. And that gave her permission to do what I like to think of it as this idea of like a collage, like your life can become a collage. She did decide to start consulting, but she also, her husband had just retired and he had for years a side business. She and he decided she had different skills than he did. They partnered together to build that side business into something that had the potential bigger than it was. And she also gave herself permission. She started taking master gardening classes, and now she also has time to garden. So it doesn't mean that, I can't speak exactly for what her income was. She's still working, but in a very, very different way. And recognizing that there's so many different ways to approach your life and gain fulfillment. And this collage, like these different pieces, all fit so nicely for her together. And it reflected those values, that purpose, that some passion with her gardening. And so I think maybe permission is part of the getting unstuck.
It's a great example. I think a lot of people think that they're alone in the world, right? They're the only one with that problem. They're the only one that feels this way. And, doesn't matter what the situation is. There's other people going through it. There's, no one's alone. So and no one's that unique. Maybe you can continue with these stories, but I just want to go back to something you said earlier about jobs and how it defines people. I think a lot of people are defined by their job, right? This example you just gave, person was somewhat defined by their 30-year career. Now they're doing this other thing. Do you have other examples of people that have been like consumed by their jobs and now they're going through this transition? How you help them, and what should our listeners think about if they're sort of feeling stuck and tied to like my job defines me. Man, you see it all the time. People get laid off and they don't know what to do because that's where they work for their whole life.
Yeah. I sometimes tell people that my most successful clients are ones who decide to take a break from work. I mean, of course, that is to a certain degree a privilege. Not everybody can do that, so I'll acknowledge that right here. But I've worked with clients throughout their career, early career, mid-career, late career, who have purposefully taken time off from work after we worked together. And so one person I was working with, she had gotten laid off and she was really fortunate to have some nice severance. And she's like, I don't know where I want to go next. And that was a lot of the conversation, a lot of fear, that identity. She was always going. 3 sessions in, she says to me, oh, well, I have this business idea and I have like a huge spreadsheet with all these pieces of that business idea. Maybe I should take some time to pursue that. And I was like, wait a minute. We've been talking for like the last, for the 3 hours. No, I mean, not a big, but, and a lot of it was like around things of developing your personal compass. And and she already had this big idea. And she's like, wait a minute, maybe I should take some time. I'm going to give this 2 or 3 months to pursue this big idea. And because it was really detailed, she knew what the competition looked like. She had some ideas about what kind of investment was required, but there was so much fear around that. So giving yourself time. I have another client who was she was working in education post-COVID, teenagers, high school. Kids are really tough. I mean, it's really, really tough. And she cared so much about those kids. And she was living in New York City. Her life was super complicated. And what she realized was that it wasn't just about the work. She had to uncomplicate her life. And she took time off. She was able to take a sabbatical. She ended up moving out of the city into the suburbs because that completely that opened up so many other things for her beyond the complexities of living in New York City. So I think that a piece of it is that we talked about permission before. If you can, and even if it's 6 weeks, even if it's 2 months. And another client took 3 months off. She left her job. She went and she traveled for 3 months, and then she came back and looked for what was next for her. But even that traveling helped her reconnect actually helped her disconnect from work and realize that she was her own person with really important values and really important things that she liked to do outside of work. And when she went back to work, she was able to put more boundaries in, because just that separation, even just for those 3 months, enabled her to see that she could live her life differently and be really fulfilled, and that it's not all about the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think those are good points too. I think as we do get older, though, our priorities shift clearly, and some of those choices that we maybe once made to completely be immersed in our 9 to 5 or whatever that job is, especially if you're an entrepreneur, it's definitely more than 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. And you say to yourself, well, I don't think I want to do that anymore. I still maybe want to work or make a living or do my side job that's now become a business, but I think I want to stop and smell the roses, as they say. And so I do find that interesting, because I do think with every change in our life or every season in our life, we do reevaluate, again, what we want to focus on, especially I think if we do have kids and they grow up and they have their own lives, that definitely has, I think, an impact on, what we decide we want to do or we don't want to do anymore. So I love that you shared those stories. Before we get to the end of our conversation, Laurie, what are the telltale signs, if you will? So individuals that are listening to this particular podcast, where they would say, I think I need to speak to someone like Laurie because of some signs and symptoms that I'm feeling or seeing.
So what are those signs or symptoms? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it is. It's like, pay attention to that voice in your head, that feeling stuck. I think, Joseph, you mentioned that, feeling unfulfilled, feeling that lack of joy and engagement, I think is a big piece of it. When you're at these inflection points, there may be some mourning. I'm working with a client now who's had a business for 25 years and he's ready to sell his business, but he's not ready to, and he's like, what does that look like next? And and there's mourning for that because that's been your whole identity. So, and I love that you use the word seasons, because you're right. We have lots of different seasons. And so that next season is a season of opportunity. So what do you want to do with that? And that's where, partnering with a coach can help bring that clarity. And by the way, it's also accountability, because we can think about this stuff for a really long time. But if you're working with someone and you're paying them, and you know that you're meeting them in 2 weeks, and so you're going to do that work and you're going to take the time. And I really view it as a gift to yourself. Listen, there's tons of self-help books out there, and a lot of them are really, really great. But frankly, it's hard to do it on your own unless you're super, super disciplined. The other thing I like to think about is, two other thoughts. One is, it's a great time for experimentation. And you can start just by, even if you're still working, you can start by taking that master class in gardening, or give yourself more. Or if you're an entrepreneur, I'm going away in a week and a half. I'm doing a hiking trip in Italy for a week with my younger daughter. So and then we're going to stay for another week. I'm out of the office for 2+ weeks. Give yourself that permission. You don't have to go to Italy. You can go, but try some different things out. Experiment and see what really resonates for you. And some things will work and some things won't. But paying attention, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So if I knew you were going to Italy, I would have really focused on that pasta question that we were talking about before we started recording. But
absolutely,
I hope you have a great trip to Italy. It sounds amazing. I've been there. I know Mary has got some connections to Italy as well.
Absolutely.
But as we wind down the show here, I'd like to ask our guests and our repeat guests similar question. What you can do a lot of things. You've done a lot of things. You had a long career in corporate America. You've been doing this for a little bit of time now. Why do you do what you do? What gets you up in the morning?
Oh, I was going to, the other I said is community and connection. And actually that's another place where, as you're thinking about where you want to go next, and building community and building connections is really, really important to me. And that, as I left my corporate career, that's really, I talked about scaffolding for my other client. That's the scaffolding for me. And so making connections with individuals, and I do group coaching too, and partnering with them and seeing them to embrace what's so important to them, and those connections that I make with my clients. I also do a lot of nonprofit work, and that's where my community comes in. But that's what gets me up in the morning and we talked about like your personal compass. Those are my wayfinding points, so to speak. So that's what gets me up in the morning. Is even like a conversation like this. These connections that we make with other people. Yeah.
No, I love that answer, and I would agree with you, and I'm sure Joseph may agree as well. I love doing nonprofit work. I do it outside of my full-time job, and I enjoy it. I like helping others, making a difference and impact. I know, Laurie, I do remember you said you did some nonprofit work, some board work, which can be fun and interesting and sometimes exhausting a little bit. So as we come to a close, Laurie, if individuals want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah. And can I offer one thing just as how do you do an exercise? It's a little bit of just a thought. As you're trying to, as we talked about community and connection, just really briefly, as you're thinking about where you want to go next, I encourage people to interview people who know you really well. Like put together, ask like 7, 8, 10 people who know you from all different points in your life, high school friends, child, former colleagues. Ask them a few questions about like, what is it that I value? If everything paid $1, what would I be doing? What's the greatest gift I've ever given you? And what's really interesting about, and I've got a few other questions, but what's really interesting about that is that people who knew that you when you were 18 and people who knew you when you're 50, know you when you're 55, it's generally really consistent. And that's very cool. Because sometimes people see you in ways that you just don't see yourself. And that can be a really, and plus it leads to some really beautiful questions or conversations. So how can people find me? You know what? They should write to me. Laurie, Laurie at lhscoaching.com. That's a good start. I know the rest of the contact information is going to be in the notes, but Laurie at lhscoaching.com. And if they want that 360 interview, I'm happy to share it. But I think that's a really great place to start as you're trying to navigate, because then you have that support system too, because you've got your friends and family and people who love you saying, oh, well, what are you doing next? Let's talk about that. So.
Yeah. And I can't help but add one more comment, which is I really, really love what you just said about asking other people, because sometimes we may not see ourselves as others do in a very interesting and positive way.
Yeah.
I know that's happened to me personally, and I've been taken back in a good way. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that is such a valuable part of our conversation. So thank you for that. Joseph, do you have any final thoughts before we close our show today?
I'm just sitting here thinking about how would I answer the question if someone asked me what was the greatest gift that they've given me. It's an interesting question.
Well, I'm going to answer that, because if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Oh,
I'm an open book.
I would say, well, Joseph, you are a true friend, and we've had many conversations, and you are just a very trustworthy person, and you really listen. And so for me personally, that's been a great gift to know that, like, I could text you or call you or email you, and you will get back to me, and you really want to know if something's not quite right, or if we're celebrating something, right? We've celebrated some new additions to our families. And so I just love that about you, and I cherish that. And I tell people all the time.
Oh, thank you, Mary. It's very good it's great to hear. It's amazing to hear.
Yeah. And that's, I feel very blessed that I'm able to say that. It's great. So for all of our listeners, we hope that you will continue to listen. Please follow us, give us feedback, tell us what you like, what you don't like. And thank you for supporting the Prime Life podcast. Joseph, great to see you again. Laurie, great to see you again as well. And I'm very excited to hear about your trip to Italy. So I hope you will let us know about that. Until next time on the Prime Life podcast, everyone have a great day.
Yeah.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.